So no, I won't be filling a glass for XXXTentacion, or however one might pronounce his name.
Our European-style socialist friends, yes, yes, of course. Well, I think that's been a very interesting starter to what we're saying. But another thing that we've been hearing a lot about in the press recently that we should all be very, very emotional about is the death of the famous rapper and cultural icon. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to get his name right. I think it's pronounced XXXTentacion, or it might be XXXTentacion or XXXTentacion. I don't know. But either way, he's dead. And the liberal media are crying their eyes out. The tributes are pouring in. This, my friends, is the greatest loss to Western culture that you could possibly imagine. This is it, boys. We are done. A guy with crazy hair who beat his pregnant girlfriend, smashing her jaw, fracturing her cheekbone and eye socket. A guy with about 50 criminal convictions to his name, who was most famous for making a music video where he hanged a white toddler as some kind of reparation for slavery. The liberals are crying their eyes out. Now, I am obviously not that bothered that this guy is dead. I didn't see him as a cultural icon. In fact, I saw his video as deeply sick. It's the kind of video that, had it been made the other way around, we would have never heard the end of it. We would all be bowing down for probably a minute's silence where we all had to self-flagellate because that video was made. It would have been used as a tool of white guilt forever. But this guy who made an extremely distasteful video, who beat his pregnant girlfriend. And when I say a beat, it wasn't just sort of a push down the stairs or, you know, a little bit of rough and tumble when they had an argument. I mean, he seriously physically wounded her. You know, that would be GBH, grievous bodily harm in the UK. It was a serious matter. But he is now being played up as some kind of, as I say, hero, a cultural icon, as some great loss to the Western world. But here again, you see how the European-style socialists who run our media and those who seek to push this very, very emotional message are turning this around to, again, make Western society feel as if they should be sorry for the loss of someone who really we should have absolutely no sorrow for whatsoever. What are your guys' thoughts on this? Have you seen this on Twitter?
I've seen it on Twitter. Yeah, I mean, I did notice. I've not followed this at all, but I'll just comment briefly. I noticed that there are these kind of tensions within the left that are very interesting. So Spotify and Apple Music had actually removed his albums from their streaming services after, I guess, the domestic abuse allegations were there, but then they kind of put them back, and then now they're lionizing him because he's dead. It's interesting. They're probably full-time positions at these corporations, which how you navigate all of these kind of things. Like, do we actually hate this person? Is he an amazing artist? Is he actually, is he sexist or actually, but he's a racial activist? So does this outweigh that one? And, you know, it must be just this Byzantine-like effort to navigate this. But yeah, no, I had never heard any of his music, so no, I won't be filling a glass for XXXTentacion, or however one might pronounce his name.
I have no idea how to pronounce it. It looks like Tentacion. I don't know if it's based on a Spanish word. But I picked up on something similar that Richard did, and that was just this swirl of conflicting messages and this whole schizophrenic vibe, for lack of a better word, to this whole thing. I didn't know much about the gentleman in question either, but I looked him up a little bit before doing this. I saw some of his live performances. I did watch that infamous video where he hangs the white child. the beginning of that video, he also attacks an older male white teacher. And there are these little vignettes in that video where there are tributes to these famous crimes, Rodney King and lynchings, and Heather Heyer was also in there. There's a shot of a girl being thrust into a windshield. So at the end of that video, the music stops, and he actually, I was not aware of this until just before the show, he actually reads a statement that he wrote, and it's kind of advocating this: if you believe that you're a supreme being, you need to have this kind of stoicism almost. He doesn't use that word, but this is what I'm getting from it, and rise above being roped into this kind of one-dimensional us versus them hatred. He said it doesn't matter if it's black on white or white on black. Taken out of context, I could actually understand where he's coming from to some degree with that, but it rings absolutely hollow when you look at the imagery in his videos, when you hear these terrible stories about his girlfriend who had to apparently get on crowdfunding and try to get enough money for her surgery to save her vision. I mean, her vision in one eye was possibly impaired for the rest of her life. So it rings very, very hollow. Now, there is this thing that a lot of his fans are talking about as well that he posted on Instagram a couple of months ago, I think it was. It's a video where he's speaking about, if I'm a sacrifice, he actually uses that word, if I'm a sacrifice, I hope that my music at least reached a certain amount of kids and was a positive influence. Now, I can't say anything one way or the other. I'm not getting into conspiracy theories, but of course it does. The alarm bells do go off thinking about the whole Hollywood cult and what really goes on there. So who knows? It's a mess. It's, as I said, a lot of confusing, conflicting messages. But also, looking at some of those live performance videos, it does speak, just to be very frank, to what our friend Jason, No White Guilt, who is not here with us today, of the different biospirit. When you look at those shows and you hear the music, I mean, it is really a caricature of just the worst aspects of popular music, and especially rap. There's really not even much of a bass line. It's just bass tones. There's guttural sounds and panting and just phrases thrown out about sex and wanting to do this and that. And I know most rappers rap to like a backing track live, but even his lyrics were pumped in. He's basically up on stage just like dancing around with his friends. He's not even doing the rapping. The music itself, I know music is subjective, and we could go into a whole other conversation about this, but just to keep it brief, to me, it's like quicksand. It pulls you down. I know every kind of people, every kind of culture needs their catharsis, needs their cathartic elements of letting go and having their times when you kind of step away from regular day-to-day life, okay? That happens in Europe as well. That is in our tradition as well. But there is nothing upward about it. Now, again, I know music is subjective, but I've done some material. I have an article on my website, and I had a long conversation. It's in my conversations playlist on my YouTube channel if anyone's interested. I had this with Carolyn Emmerich about the Faustian or the European spirit behind rock and roll. Now, maybe not everyone likes rock and roll. It's not the only genre I like, but I do love some classic rock. And I know it has its decadent elements. I know most rock stars are not people to emulate personally, but I still see in rock and roll more of an outward transcendental look towards the world, trying to rise up or trying to celebrate life. There's something more proactive about it. Or even if someone's going to argue with me and say everything I'm saying right now is subjective, then at the very least I could say it rings true with me. Whereas this kind of thonic, just bringing you down like quicksand, like this really guttural rap, you just look at this and you say, like, this is our culture. This is what's happening. I feel like the video, if you go look at his videos of his live performances, people will watch things like this in 100 years. And it's either going to be, well, this was the death throes of Western civilization. This is what it was like at the end. Or conversely, and this is what we're hoping for, this is almost where we went off the cliff, but we reeled it in, and now we're back. Because again, I have to be honest, I resent the fact that, and we know what it's about, but the Atlantic Monthly is writing about him and celebrating him, and I think even saying that he was some kind of misunderstood genius. It's like, this is not the kind of culture I want to live in, where our cultural institutions and so-called intellectual magazines are even talking about this. This goes to show the different instincts, the different spirit. By the way, Atlantic Monthly, I did I just remembered I quoted at the beginning of my own article on rock and roll about how in the January, February 2009 issue, it was the end of whiteness in America. And they actually used a quote saying, from a blogger, Christian Lander, white culture, what is white culture? It's only Led Zeppelin and Guns N' Roses and Family Ties. So it's this mixture of like classic rock and 80s nostalgia. Like that's all we have in pop. And I was showing in my article and my talk with Carolyn Emmerich about, well, what is the nugget of truth there? Even though rock and roll may be decadent, there is still that Faustian spirit that comes through. But a lot of different things I could say. I am a musician, so things about music do hit me in a certain way. It's very interesting to me. But I will leave it at there for now. I hope that gives you some food for thought.
Okay, food for thought. So we're talking a little bit about music, and I don't know anything about this extension guy other than that video that Mark was referencing with the child in the noose. But I do know that our European-style socialist friends who also have been running the music industry since the days of Tin Pan Alley, they promote, especially among black performers and rappers, they promote decadence and hostility and violence, gangbanging. I think about Snoop Diggity Dogg, who had some sort of murder. He was involved in some sort of murder. He was eventually, the charges were dropped, but there's all sorts of very shady and disreputable things about him. He was involved with the whole Girls Gone Wild, semi-porn or soft pornographic enterprise for years. He was on those advertisements. He's basically a poster child for being stoned all day, and yet the European style socialists who run Nickelodeon, they invite him onto the Kids' Choice Awards. On the Kids' Choice Awards, and it's not just Snoop Diggity Dogg, it's Nicki Minaj, who won the award, the Best Song Award in 2015 for a song I guess she did with Ariana Grande, Bang Bang, and it's basically about having sex. And of course, she's done all sorts of other songs. There's a song that I analyzed with Dr. Duke on his show. I did an analysis of the lyrics. It had the F word like 40 times, or maybe it was the N word 40 times, and just things that can't be repeated. Yet she's promoted. She's promoted not just in general, but specifically to young children. Beyonce brought on to the in Black Panther garb into the Super Bowl halftime show, which is one of the most watched cultural events in the United States. Sings a song. She didn't sing the whole song, but obviously it led to tens of millions of views on YouTube. And the whole song includes lyrics about when her boyfriend F me good, I take his A to Red Lobster. So this is what's being promoted. I mean, just what does it say? What kind of cultural trash is this? What are they trying to do to us? It's quite obvious. But that's a rant. I don't think the audience needs to hear more of this rant. You can see where it's going, but I'll throw it back to you all.
Yeah, I'll make two really quick comments. First off, I think we should properly use the word decadence. The music of Nicki Minaj and XXXTentacion or whoever he is not even decadent. Richard Wagner or Richard Strauss or Mahler, like that's decadence. There is something of a kind of overstuffed, luxurious, wallowing in emotion and so on that I would associate with decadence of late romanticism and so on. I think there's something to music that even makes earlier versions of rap somewhat commendable, in the sense that some 80s rap and so on, they would kind of tell a story of sorts and what have you. I'm not defending it. I certainly remember when I was about 10 years old, listening to some of this early 90s rap, getting the cassette tapes and feeling like, oh, I was a total bad. I was a little scandalous or something. But there's something about the Nicki Minaj and something that it's almost like this reversion into total childlike, like meaningless. It's like Dada, just no sense to lyrics, just weird pickup phrases and just kind of like vague gestures towards either Red Lobster or some just like kind of gross sex act that she's going to do with her boyfriend. There's a kind of degeneration to an almost infantile state that we're seeing. I don't know exactly where it can go. It's when you enter a world of like nonsense lyrics and scatological stuff like that, it's almost like we've seen the end of it.
I'd like to make just a quick comment. You referenced early rap, and I remember the first time I heard rap was probably 1980, 1981, and it was a song by, I guess, Curtis Blow, and it was talking about President Reagan's election. And it was interesting because it is a genre, a format where you can say a lot. Rock and roll songs might be a little bit more like Japanese haiku. You have to, if you have to paint a picture with very scarce strokes, whereas rap, I mean, you can say a whole lot in rap. But one of the big groups in the 1980s was Public Enemy, and I'm not going to pretend that I know a whole lot about Public Enemy, but one of the key people in Public Enemy was Richard Griffin, aka Professor Griff. And when Dr. Duke and I were engaged actually in kind of a feud with Nicki Minaj, a media-enabled feud, Richard Griff, or Professor Griff, weighed in and said, Dr. Duke is 1,000% right about Nicki Minaj. So there you go.
That's funny.